PC gamers have tons to look forward to. 40 new PC games of 2018. And number 1, Metro Exodus is a post-apocalyptic FPS that puts you in the post-apocalyptic wasteland of what used to be Russia, and aside from shooting, also puts you in a lot of stealth and survival horror situations. It is actually a fairly scary looking game, but I don't know that they're going to lean too far into it because it does seem very action-oriented as well. Nice thing is, sandbox and linear levels. They want to give you the best of both worlds, and I love the setting. Number 2, World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth is the expansion follow-up to Legion, and wasn't actually even announced that long ago. It was November. They're raising the level cap from 110 to 120, that's the first big thing. Another big change is in the PvP rules. You'll be able to toggle PvP if you want to attack other factions, but by default, you can only attack NPCs in the open world. The plot basically continues where Legion leaves off, as was kind of expected, and if you're playing World of Warcraft, obviously you have to get this. Number 3, Monster Hunter World is an action RPG where you go up against huge monsters in a huge open world that has the benefit of incorporating a lot of newer open world style gameplay elements into an established series that already works very well, and though the game hasn't been out a long time, it is being enjoyed heavily by people. I've been really enjoying it myself. I think it's kind of the sum of all parts of the Monster Hunter series, and if the idea of hunting monsters in a third-person open world sounds even vaguely appealing to you, I think this is the game for you. Number 4, Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlords is a medieval action RPG follow-up that brings the graphics of the series into the modern era. The previous games have been really enjoyable, but do feel a bit dated when you play them now. This one isn't like suddenly perfect, but if you're looking for an analogy to the Roman Empire that you get to call the flags and go to battle in, this is probably where you're gonna want to go this year. Number 5 is Agony, is a survival horror game that takes place in hell. You can possess other beings in hell and roam around generally trying to use their special abilities and trying to avoid demons. There's also puzzles, and in a lot of ways this looks like the representation of hell that we've never gotten in games, and I'm thinking it's probably going to be good, but in a very different way. Number 6, Scorn is a weird first-person shooter that I've said in the past looks like it may be a living Tool album cover from the 90s. It's a location-based game where every new location contains a story, a theme, different puzzles, different characters, and everything is kind of techno-organic. It's uncomfortable to look at, which is always cool. The guns are like living organisms, I think. And although we don't know a whole hell of a lot about it yet, that's the point. The whole idea is that you're searching for answers about the game's world. If anything, this one is going to be an experience. Number 7, Hunt Showdown is kind of a spiritual successor to Darksiders, and they do intend to actually incorporate a lot of the quote-unquote old-school elements of the genre. You'll be doing a lot of what you did in Darksiders, hunting down monsters, but one particularly interesting thing about this, they were gonna stop making games at Crytek. And 3 years later, here we are with a brand new IP. I think it's safe to say this is a game that may be one of passion because they were done, basically. It's set in the late 19th century, it's meant to be a slightly more accurate version of the era, although you will be hunting monsters. Hell, I'm interested. Number 8, Age of Empires 4 is of course the continuation of the long-dead Age of Empires series. Age of Empires is one of the more intense RTS games out there, and although we don't specifically know exactly what's coming in the game or when the game is coming, it is a new Age of Empires game that is not Age of Empires Online, and that's a good thing. Number 9, Pillars of Eternity 2 is the sequel to the game that pretty much saved Obsidian Entertainment. I mean, they'd probably still be around, but it really brought them back in a big way. Not that they did a bad job with the licensed South Park game, but it certainly wasn't their IP. This is. Pillars of Eternity was a really enjoyable isometric RPG that played a lot like the 90s style, but with some notable improvements that I think really made it playable in a way that some of those games are a little bit lacking in. I mean, it's really one of the finest examples of an isometric RPG, period. If they had released this in the 1990s, people would hail it as literally like the best game of all time. Not everybody, but people who like isometric RPGs. Number 10, Vampire is a game that looks particularly good. It's an action RPG with some pretty cool maneuvering elements. He's got kind of a smoke dash that I like, but what I'm particularly interested in is that he is a doctor and a vampire and has to balance that. That contains some element of player choice, and I'm interested to see where the story goes, and the mechanics themselves look great. I'm there. Bring on Vampire. Number 11, Kingdom Come Deliverance. If you're interested in The Witcher, except for not The Witcher, and what I mean by that is there is no witchery, there are no fairy tales, no dragons, no magic, none of that. It is just pure realism, and if I'm totally honest, it's something I am here for. I really, really want to try this game. The idea that we have a sort of Skyrim, but with none of the mysticism, it's worth a shot, and if it works out, I think it's gonna spawn like a genre. Number 12, Borderlands 3 is the sequel, the new entry into the mainline series of Borderlands, a comedic shooter with an interesting and compelling narrative that I personally enjoy quite a bit. We don't know a hell of a lot other than the graphics have received a pretty favorable update. Like, it doesn't lose its style, but it certainly does look like a next generation game compared to the last one, and that's, in my opinion, a big thing. I'm glad they did that, but as we know more, we'll keep you updated. It's something I'm really looking forward to. Number 13 is Far Cry 5 brings in some of the improvements from Far Cry Primal, such as the training and domesticating of animals, and plops it into another absurd modern day Far Cry story. This one takes place in the United States of America. We've got a wild religious far-right leader, and you're essentially up against his cult. Now, that scenario has caused a little bit of argument, but personally I'm very interested in it. It has the potential to have a lot of personality, and that's often what Far Cry brings to the table. Number 14, State of Decay 2 focuses the series on cooperation and teamwork, making it so that there's more of a community element to the same State of Decay survival gameplay, and I think it brings another element to it that seems interesting and worthwhile. If anything, it's kind of the expression of what a lot of people tried to do when they played State of Decay, teaming up with their friends, and I think it's gonna work out well. Number 15, Pray for the Gods is a survival game set out in the middle of the wilderness, where you essentially have to take on the gods that you quote-unquote believe in by climbing them in boss fights that also play out kind of like puzzles. It's a really interesting game. I love the aesthetic, I love the snow. More games set in the snow, please. There's a few of them on this list, but people's interpretation of snow is so wildly different, and it's just a really interesting aesthetic. I look forward to the puzzle boss fights. It looks cool, literally. Number 16, Anno 1800 is another in an interesting series of world building set in the Industrial Age. Essentially, you have to choose whether or not you are going to be good or bad during the Industrial Revolution as you build up your own sort of empire. Not physical empire, but rather capital empire. It actually looks like a pretty cool game, and the graphics are beautiful. This is what I can't wait for. Number 17, Metal Gear Survive, which is a game that the announcement of made look terrible. But there is a little bit of hope. The beta wasn't bad. It was really hardcore, like hardcore to the point where I'm not sure if I would call it hardcore. I would maybe say at some points I felt it was a little unfair, but that is something that has been addressed. It's a survival horror game in the style of Metal Gear Solid 5, and it seems to kind of work, but we didn't get it for a long enough term to give it a real judgment, I think, so hopefully it's a pleasant surprise. Number 18. The Last Night is a cinematic side-scrolling platform game that takes a cyberpunk aesthetic, and let's just say this, it is easily one of the most beautiful pixel art games of all time. There's not a lot to know about it yet, other than it's really pretty. Number 19, a new Battlefield title. Now, let me just say we don't know a lot about it. We just know that the previous Battlefield did incredibly well. There's some evidence to suggest World War II is the era they're gonna occupy with it, but we don't have anything 100% certain yet. Just know it's coming. Number 20, Tropico 6 is basically kind of a dictator simulator. They made the contention that they want it not to be easy to appease everybody in this game, so that means it will be harder to maintain your dictatorship. You rule a nation, you steal landmarks from other countries, and you can be as bad or as good as you want. Number 21, Ace Combat 7, Skies Unknown, is of course an action arcade flying dogfight combat extravaganza. If you're familiar with the series, it's of course not intended as simulation. It's fast-paced, it's fun as hell. Other than that, not a lot known about it. But the previous games are fun, and I think it's worth looking forward to. Number 22, Code Vein is an action RPG that takes place in a post-apocalyptic, vampire-oriented, Dark Souls-y type game. But it is an open-world, anime-centric game, and I think that alone is probably going to differentiate it enough. I love the style. It's a really dark, like I said, anime look, and everything I've seen of it actually does look very cool. Number 23, Dauntless is a fantasy, free-to-play action RPG where players take the role of slayers and you take down behemoths, basically monster hunting. The developers are former Riot Games developers. Their team includes a bunch of people from Capcom, BioWare, and Blizzard, and is intended as kind of competition to Monster Hunter, although I imagine it's going to bring in a lot of its own ideas. It looks cool to say the very least. Number 24, System Shock 3 is the sequel to the popular series, and it looks like a hell of an interesting one. It picks up the story just where it left off. Shodan managed to survive. If you don't understand that, you're gonna need to play the originals. Fortunately, those are being redone in HD, and they're gorgeous. At very least the first one, hopefully the second one too. But this is something I think everybody has wanted for a very long time, who kind of likes the resource management stuff from BioShock a bit more. System Shock is kind of like the less mainstream version of BioShock, and it's sci-fi instead of basically historical fiction sci-fi-ish. The previous games were awesome, and I can't wait for this one. Number 25, Jurassic World Evolution is actually a simulation in which you run a Jurassic Park. In fact, more than one Jurassic Park. But it doesn't just cover management and simulation areas, there's also creature development, which is, obviously basically a dino maker. That's something that I think everybody who likes Jurassic Park is interested in. And if done right, this is gonna be a hell of a game. Number 26, Pathologic 2. If you're interested in an open-world survival horror game where the worst thing in the world is a plague in which you play as a medic, this is the game you're looking for. They tout the idea that you can't save everyone and that the idea of the game is getting to know the plague and what it can do because it isn't just a disease. I don't know, it sounds like a pretty innovative idea to me. It looks gorgeous, and I'm ready. Number 27, Crackdown 3. Now, if you know me and Crackdown 3, and at this point you might, I've been talking about this game for years. At this point, all I really want is to know for sure it's coming. Even with Terry Crews showing up, becoming the face of the game, I was still like, I'll believe it when I see it, and I'm still there. Which sucks because this is one of the games that I want more than anything. The destruction of large buildings and city elements in such an expansive manner just hasn't been done in a game on this level, and that's what I'm here for. I want that. Please release this damn game this year. Number 28, Darksiders 3. Obviously, Hunt Showdown is not the only follow-up to the Darksiders series we are getting, except for this is an official one, an actual in-world follow-up to Darksiders 1 and 2. Darksiders 3 is meant to take place parallel to the events of the first two games, where you play as the sister of one of the Horsemen of the Apocalypse on a quest to destroy the 7 deadly sins. 29 is Final Fantasy 15. Now, this is obviously not an entirely new game, but the way they made it for the PC is. They're saying it's a generation ahead of the console version. It was literally built from the ground up for PC gamers with the intent of making it significantly nicer. If that doesn't make you at least interested, you probably don't like Final Fantasy anyhow. 15, in my opinion, is the best Final Fantasy in quite a while. That's a controversial statement, I know, but what a game. Can't wait to play it again with a generation better of graphics. Number 30, Phoenix Point is a turn-based strategy tactical combat game that comes from Snapshot Games, which is important to note, was founded by the creator of the XCOM franchise, who is also the lead designer on this game. And guess what? It's Lovecraft inspired. We seem to be getting a lot of Lovecraftian games, and I'm actually not upset about that. That is such a good framework to work on sci-fi within, and I am so interested just based on that. Number 31, Dragon Ball FighterZ. And I make a little jest at the name of it just because they use the Z and it looks actually fairly stylish if you look at the logo. It's a fighting game, kind of 2.5D, not particularly 3D. It's tough to describe, honestly, but it is actually a really good fighting game that borrows some interesting concepts, such as the team mechanics specifically from Marvel vs. Capcom. It also plays a lot like that game, with some notable exceptions. But if you understand Marvel vs. Capcom, you understand this game. Which, for people who like MVC, obviously great. For people who don't, obviously not. Especially if they're Dragon Ball fans. But it's a fast-paced, enjoyable, chaotic fighter that I really do enjoy personally, that I really just want to play more of currently. Number 32. Industries of Titan is basically a pretty cool looking simulator, strategy, city building, battle game. Now if you ask me, that's actually, though a bit muddled sounding, a really good combination of things you might want to engage in, especially given the aesthetic. It's a futuristic industrial world that you're existing in, and I pretty much love its style. It's a game that I really hope is good because it looks cool as hell. Number 33. Ni no Kuni 2 is the sequel to the JRPG that sort of brought us an interesting dual world story with a Studio Ghibli aesthetic that it retains, however it doesn't actually retain any ties to the studio other than the composer and the artist doing the character designs. This game revamps the battle system from the first, which was fun but was a little bit basic. This one seems to go for more of a melee-oriented combat, and it's really interesting. I loved the first. Despite some minor flaws, I think this one's gonna be better. Number 34. Dynasty Warriors 9 is a continuation of a very long-standing franchise. It takes the game into the open world. If you're looking for the before you buy on it, I'll be doing it. My initial impressions are I'm having fun, but if you don't like Dynasty Warriors, you're not gonna like this one. It modernizes some elements of Dynasty Warriors without feeling foreign to the franchise in any way, shape, or form. This is truly a Dynasty Warriors game, but I've got a ways to go with the game as of this recording, so watch the before you buy if you want a full opinion on it. It's fun though, I'll say that. Number 35. Left Alive is a shooter from Square Enix set in the Front Mission universe. Now, we don't know a lot more than that, but Front Mission is an interesting world where these huge sort of EU-style unions and their various countries are basically fighting with each other. They have huge mechs that they use in these wars, and I think you understand where I'm going with this. Again, we don't know a hell of a lot about Left Alive, but the world is awesome that it takes place in, and it should be cool. Number 36. Frostpunk is a city-building game set in the snow, thank you very much, that sort of brings an element of survival to it. The game takes place in an alternate 1886 where ice storms basically made everything terrible. You have to build a city around a generator, and you have to make a lot of moral choices. It looks unique, and it sounds unique, so I want to play it. Number 37. U-Boot is a submarine simulation game by Deepwater Studios and is supposed to play a little bit like Fallout Shelter. This, to me, is a pretty interesting idea, knowing that in Fallout Shelter, the goal is essentially to curate a self-contained society that's underground after nuclear apocalypse. Applying that to a German U-boat during World War II seems like it could work. It's a good concept. Number 38. Abandoned Ship is sort of a tactical combat game with exploration elements that's inspired by old naval oil paintings in its visual style. The world's procedurally generated, and you're gonna end up fighting against a bunch of other ships in what looks to be a fairly interestingly different take on this type of idea. Number 39. Phantom Doctrine. In 1983, the Cold War was happening, and this takes place in an alternate history in which you are in control of a secret organization called the Cabal. It's a thriller, and your whole thing is that you're supposed to fight a global conspiracy, and given its isometric viewpoint, just seems like a really unique game. Number 40. Far Lone Sails is an exploration, kind of simulation, kind of just adventure game. You're the driver of a large vehicle, you're exploring a dried ocean after the apocalypse, and you're searching for anything old civilization oriented. It's side-scrolling, and really the obvious emphasis is on exploration. It's a cool looking game. That they've kept it fairly vague at this point is actually an advantage. It's one of those things that piques your curiosity, and I can't wait to play it. What game are you looking forward to the most on PC this year? Leave us a comment, let us know, and if you enjoyed this video, please click like. If you're not subscribed, now would be a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video.